Hello, hello, hello. So Lee Karaoke here with launch this weekend, and I wanted to go ahead and actually just give you a quick update. So last week, what I did is I shared with you my workflow, how I'm actually generating creative, right? Finding hooks. Actually, I have a researcher as an agent within Claude that actually goes and researches and sees, hey, what are the trending topics? And then it goes, and then I have an article writer, and then I have the queen creative, and then finally the meta buyer who literally puts everything together. So I wanted to go ahead and just do a quick update on performance of week one, right? So this is week one. So the key thing is, before I actually go into the actual report, right? And I'm using Manus for this, and I'll tell you, actually, let me just tell you why I'm using Manus. It's because I'm running ads on Meta, and then Manus got acquired by Meta, right? So the likelihood, hey, what's the likelihood that Manus actually has access to all the data, right? Impression data, cost per impression, what other industries are doing, right? It has all that data, right? So it only makes sense to actually use Manus. If you're running Facebook ads, use Manus for query and for evaluation and things like that. If you're running Google ads, right, just use Gemini, right? Whatever LLM that's native to the platform that you're using to actually run ads, use that platform because it has all the data, right? So it just makes sense. It'll have all the information on what you ought to be doing just based on trends, right? And based on data. So what I did, I went ahead and downloaded my report. So this is my report, and this is from February 1st all the way to the 18th. I don't believe I was running ads on February 1st, but it's everything I've done up to this date, right? So the first thing is my ad spend. I spent $84.66 just to run two campaigns. I was running two campaigns, right? Creative 1 and Creative 2. And again, this is just testing. So another question that usually used to come up, when I was coaching is that, hey, how much should I spend on ads, right? And that's a fair enough question, right? How much should you spend on ads? And most agencies, and I learned this from Justin Brook, most agencies will actually spend 3 to about 5 times the ad budget, right? Your average cart value. So if your average cart value is $100, put aside at least $300 to $500. That's a good enough testing budget. And remember, testing, all you're doing is really just buying data. You're just buying data so you can see, hey, what is the actual cost per sale, right? Testing your different creatives. And now it's much, much easier if you're doing it on Meta. And the reason why is because Meta now has this algorithm called Andromeda, which was an update, I think, from last year, whereby it's now using AI. And it's so smart because it has all the data. Remember, Facebook has been around for over 15 years, right? Or probably even 20 years, right? When people that were in college, that's when it started. And now most people that were in college are using Facebook, and now parents and they've graduated. So it's been around for a while. So the key thing is that it has all the behavioral data, right? And now it's bolted AI, and it really knows I remember back in the day, I think when they were starting the advertising platform, it was still going through its machine learning, its iteration. So it didn't know hey, it had to go through these iterations to actually get smarter and smarter and smarter. But now it's really, really smart, right? If it tells you that, hey, it's recommending that you increase your budget, just follow what it's saying, right? I know sometimes people say, oh no, don't follow, the recommendation, you'll get burnt or whatever. But now it's gotten so smart that it just follow the recommendation. I remember back in the day when there was, I think, was it not Audience? There was this other platform that your ads would show up even on places you didn't even approve, and you'd get charged for it. But now I think the algorithm's gotten really, really smart. So just follow what it says. So in fact, that was one of the experiments. So campaign 2 was, hey, to hell, I'm not going to follow what you're recommending. I'll go ahead and do what I want to do, right? And I put in $5 a day. Let's do $5 a day, right? And that $5 a day was doing nothing. It was just costing me. It was literally just burning money, right? Because all I was getting was impressions. The impressions weren't converting. I wasn't even getting as many clicks, right? As you can see, I didn't spend that much, The first one I spent about for the first campaign, I spent about $64.73, right? The frequency was about one. Frequency just simply means how many times the ad was being shown, right? This one actually had way less impressions and I was paying more, but look at this, right? This had way more impressions, right? And I was paying way less, but guess what? This didn't convert, right? It didn't convert. And I think the key reason is because if you go for low budgets, like you're limiting your seat at the table to actually play. Remember, it's an auction. So if you're going with low budgets, like you're limiting what you can participate in, right? What auction you can participate in, right? So just from this, my big epiphany was, hey, just spend the money, right? And the problem is not spending the money. I think a lot of times people have this, they go in cold feet because they're looking at the cost of acquiring a customer, when the real value is not the cost, but rather the value of acquiring this customer. It's just like a market, like you're going to a market. If you only look at how much it's costing you, you're missing out on the investment, right? You're missing out on the participation because you're only looking at the cost. And this is one of those things that's binary, meaning you can't just look at it in isolation and say, oh, I'm paying too much, because you need a reference point, right? You're paying too much in comparison to what you're selling, or you're paying too much in comparison to your average cart value. Without that kind of correlation or comparison, then you can't really justify and say you're paying too much or too little, right? So, and that's why you run tests. You run tests so you could be able to determine, hey, am I overpaying or am I underpaying, right? Of course, no one complains if you're underpaying and you're getting customers, but at the same time, the key question is, are you overpaying? So running these tests, spending about 100, again, 3 to 5 times your average cart value, will give you like a rough ballpark of, hey, are you within spec or are you out of spec? So let's continue. So when I'm evaluating the report, the first thing I want to really look at, I don't even look at link clicks. Some people look at, oh, how much was my cost per click? My blended cost per click, and that's all good. But the key thing I look at, the first thing I really look at is I look at CTR, right? And click-through rate. And click-through rate is literally a ratio between the impressions, how many people were shown the ad, and how many people actually clicked, right? So the click-through, and typically you want to kind of shoot for anywhere between 3 to 5%, right? Under 3%, that means, hey, you're missing the target. Like you're not even getting into the conversation, right? Under 3%, you typically want to shoot for 3 to 5%. Outside of 5%, like you're really just clickbaitish, right? You're only bringing in people that are really, like, they love to click, right? They don't even care. You could be selling mangoes, they'll click on it, right? So you want to be around 3 to 5%. That way, and this is 3 to 5%. Again, percentage, it's the ratio between how many people are shown the ad and how many people actually click, right? So that's the click-through rate. And that tells you the performance of the ad. Is your creative doing pretty good? So I think so you can see 3.28 for campaign number 1 and 3.32, right? Campaign number 2 had a higher click-through rate, right, than campaign number 1. The other thing I also look at is not CPC, so I look at cost per purchase, right? And this is a really important metric, right? So just look at this, right? So cost per purchase for campaign 1, right, was $32.37. So if I didn't even run campaign 2, right, I would have been okay, right? Because I spent $32.37. And again, this is really just, yes, a lot of statisticians would love to say this is inconclusive because it's really low, right? Like the data set is really low, but at least it gives me direction, right? Impressions, 3,000 impressions is nothing, right? But it still gives me some kind of direction. I know it's not a linear correlation, but at least it gives me a ballpark of, hey, if I'm doing budgeting, I need some kind of ballpark. Like, how much is it really costing to at least get a buyer, right? So $32.37, that's roughly how much it's costing me. If I didn't even run the second campaign, because the second campaign didn't even do anything, right? It would have cost me $32.37, but because I ran the second campaign, it took the numbers up because I didn't even get a sale from the second campaign, right? So that's the other thing. And then purchase rate per landing page views, the blended one is, so this one was like 6.25%. That's pretty good, right? The other one, nothing, right? So that means that the page is doing pretty good. It's doing, like, typically for cold, for someone who doesn't know you, who's never heard of you, you're shooting for 1 to 3%. If you could get a 1 to 3%, you're pretty good, right? But 6.25, that's fantastic. So now I took this report, took it to Manus. I was like, Manus, tell me what I already know, right? Tell me what, deduce for me. Talk to me, Osiah, and let me know what I need to do. So I brought it to Manus, and Manus told me, hey, first of all, you're already in the red, right? And this is where a lot of people usually would have probably been like, yeah, it's time to hang the boots. But I've been around this for a long time to know that, hey, you just need to do incremental steps, right? Remember, winning campaigns are not actually discovered and they're built over time. Meaning you do tweaks, you go back. You do tweaks, you go back. You do tweaks, you go back, right? It's iterative. It's not like, hey, out of the gate, like, you have a winner. That's very rare. It's not to say it's impossible, but it's very, very rare. For the majority of campaigns, you're going to have to go back and do some tweaks, right? So out of the gate, and this is just very preliminary, $40 at $66 in the red. It's costing me, blended again from the two campaigns, $42.33, got two purchases. My reach, 7,174 clicks, 195 click-through rate, blended again, 3.31, not too bad, but this is telling me like, hey, I'm already in the hole. I knew that already from the get-go, right? I'm losing $25.33 for every sale. So how do I fix this? So this is where now you bring in the funnel person, right? The funnel person, or sometimes they're called conversion rate optimization guy. He comes in, he looks, the ads are doing what they're supposed to do, but there's things we can do to actually solve it, right? So the first thing is, hey, we need to kill campaign 2, right? That's the $5 a day campaign. It's getting a lot of clicks, but it's not converting, right? Cost per sale is 249% above the break even, which means that it's costing me. That second campaign, that $5. So this is the problem of cheapness, right? You try and go for $5 a day because you heard someone saying, hey, do $5 a day, and then it's literally just costing you, right? It's more expensive. Like if I didn't even run the first campaign and used that budget from the second campaign and just used it on the first campaign, I could have probably gotten more sales, right? But here, my experimentation, my scientific mind just said, no, go ahead and test the theory, right? Which is all good. So only one campaign converting 2 sales. So that's the campaign I ought to be scaling, right? Cheaper clicks, campaign 2 does not equal sales. And that's the thing, right? So a lot of times, and this has been a pivotal conversation. It's a conversation a lot of people have, especially if you're in media buying. Like, hey, no, you're paying too much, cheap clicks. Like, it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter how much you pay for the click. What matters is the click converting, right? And how much you earning from the click, right? If you go to the market and you only look at the cost, you could lose participation and lose a great investment because you're only looking at the cost rather than the value. And true entrepreneurs don't only look at the cost because they understand the cost is just the cost. The cost is the cost, right? The true entrepreneurs, they look at, hey, is this underpriced, right? Is this an underpriced asset? And you're looking at it from the lens of an investor. Is this an underpriced asset? And can I go in and get attention? Then I can convert the attention, because all we're doing is we're trading attention. Can I convert attention, with something that is way more valuable to you and the recipient, right? Such that paying for that advertising is just a cost of doing business, right? So if you approach it from an investor's mind, then ads will work. It'll work. There'll be some tweaking. It'll take some time, but it'll work, right? But it just needs patience, right? So cheaper clicks don't equate to sales. That's great. And then no back-end monetization. So I do have, like, my monetization was just a simple upgrade to a VIP, but I definitely get what Manus is trying to tell me. It's literally telling me, hey, the first thing is kill that second campaign, the $5 a day. Just kill it. 118 clicks with no conversion is pitiful, right? Double down on the first campaign and increase the budget. Fantastic. I'll definitely do that. Analyze campaign 1 creative. Find the elements or the creatives that actually got converted and then model that. I'll definitely do that. And now I know my ballpark figure, how much it's going to cost to actually get a sale, right? So that's great. I'm not starting from zero. And that's the beauty of these campaigns. You're not really starting from zero. You're actually building upon momentum that you've already created. Second thing is, hey, quality over quantity, 100%, investigate campaign 2 landing page, high clicks, 0 conversions, test campaign 1's creative on broader audiences. Fantastic. I'll do that. Focus on iPhone users. Okay, that's fantastic. 64.9% of campaign 1's clicks. Haha. Okay. That's great insight, right? So second thing, and these little things, they make all the difference, right? These little things make all the difference. So second thing, and I've actually heard of a statistic that iPhone users are better buyers than Android. And don't crucify me for this, but that's what I've heard. Word on the streets is that iPhone users tend to be better buyers than Android users. Back-end monetization, add an order bump, I already do have one, and then high ticket sale post workshop, definitely. So I'll start implementing some of these insights and then see, because if the math doesn't work, right, it doesn't matter if you're launching. And this is what I talk about in Launch This Weekend, right? If your math ain't working, the first thing you want to look at is math, right? And the fastest way to get to the math and figure out what the math is by running ads. Like some people say, just launch it, go knock on doors, and that's all great, right? And you can do all that. But if you have an idea and you need speed, right? You really need to validate, then run ads, like fast, quick. You very quickly know with $100, you'll very quickly know what's working. And the faster you can get to what's working, the faster you're in a position to actually win. Scale profitability. Okay, awesome. So that is the update I wanted to share with you. Hopefully you got some great insights from this update, and I look forward to seeing you at the workshop. Come to the workshop. Let's talk more. Cheers. Bye.